Hey everybody, this is Roy Carter from Rectitude Media, and yeah, it's been a while since I last did a video, so just figured I had to do it just because of the state of the world is right now and everything. It's looking pretty crazy, I have to say. I mean, for once, and actually quite some time, looks like that U.S. and Saudi Arabia are kind of at odds with each other, which is interesting. Mostly because of the 9/11 28 pages, which I know so many people, including myself, that were called a conspiracy theorist for even, telling people that the 28 pages existed. And it wasn't from the actual 9/11 Commission report, which was like, I think they spent about $12 or $13 million, which just goes to show you how much of a whitewash it was. But, yeah, they actually had it so that there was the Intelligence Committee, because they're talking about with the FBI and the intelligence services there. And apparently there's 28 pages of it that people have been saying, different bipartisan Republicans and Democrats have also said that, it makes you pretty much rethink all the events that happened in 9/11 and shows that there was actually a lot of Saudi involvement. I think even Bandar Bush, as they call him, his wife was implicated in funneling money to the actual terrorists that were supposedly involved just days before 9/11, so that's kind of interesting. And, coming from the point of view of the families who were affected, who lost loved ones, I do think that the 28 pages should be readily available to the public. And, a lot of people are giving Trump, crap and stuff like that, but I mean, if it wasn't for him bringing a lot of these issues to light, it would just be, he'd just be considered, be called a conspiracy theorist by a lot of people. They just discredit you and move on. And I think, recently he's been meeting with, he met with Henry Kissinger and a few other people, but I think he's doing that just because he's running for the head of the Republican Party, so, if he doesn't want to get assassinated, he's pretty much going to, or have the nomination stolen on him, he's going to have to, talk to a few people. So whether or not he decides to go full Obama and, completely lie about everything he campaigned on, we'll have to wait and see for that. I mean, being Canadian, there was this huge we had like our new Obama with a whole bunch of trendy liberals kind of just falling for the whole legalized weed, and Justin Trudeau is our savior, so they voted for him. I didn't, I can tell you that. Oh man. But, we don't really have much of a choice here in Canada. I mean, we've got more than two parties, but each party pretty much, and I've said this before, promotes one aspect of the New World Order or the other, so you really can't win. It's gotten to the point where I've just kind of given up on politics and realized that, Canada has a lot of complacent idiots. I mean, they had Dan Dix from Press for Truth going out in Vancouver asking people if they even knew what Bilderberg is, and so many Canadians just don't know what the hell's going on at all. They're just so completely brainwashed by what our mainstream media here does. Now, our mainstream media in Canada isn't as bad as the United States, but it is in its own way. It's kind of like our mainstream media here in Canada is like CBC, CTV, and what they do is they kind of have like a very cookie-cutter kind of media, where they'll have like a couple of like events or something like that, or, some intriguing thing, but then they won't actually go really into it, and then they'll just be like, oh, today on the weather, or, they'll talk about hockey or some other sports that, the mindless masses care about, but I really don't care, because why would I care about sport? I mean, hey, for people that are sports enthusiasts that are like, that memorize everything about their team and stuff and are really like, rah, 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 by all means. I mean, if that's their thing, go for it. It's fun. But when I see that the state of the world is right now, where we're seeing, here in Canada, they're trying to pass a law where even if you disagree with like the transgender thing, if you say that there's only two sexes, then apparently that can be perceived as possibly transphobic, and you can go to jail for that crap. It's just stupid. The Justice Minister, and at the exact same time, they're trying to make the Justice Minister come up with like legalized weed and stuff. So it gets to the point where Canada kind of just gets like too liberal for a lot of things. But we have like Rebel.media, which I don't mind some of their stuff, but they're obviously like the conservative circle jerk that they pretty much represent to, with Joe Oliver saying that the TPP is a great deal for Canada, which is total bullshit. I mean, NAFTA wasn't a really, they tried to push that off as the best thing since sliced bread, and, pretty much 800,000 manufacturing jobs in Canada alone have been bled overseas to China, so just goes to show you how that goes. So I can't really trust them completely, but, I tell everybody, if you can watch multiple different viewpoints of this political spectrum. It's really hard to sit through some channels, especially if there's like a heavy bias of something of an opinion you don't completely agree with, but it is kind of good to hear what they have to say so you can kind of try to understand it from them, and you can that way kind of figure out what's total bullshit and what actually has a legitimate argument. So anyway, back to what's going on with Saudi Arabia and the US right now. Just recently, actually, it seems that with the threats of the Saudi Arabia talking about dumping $700 billion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds, Obama was kind of at the point where he was kind of resisting the bill, but from the best of my knowledge, it's already gone through. So, I don't know whether or not he's still yet to sign it. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I'll probably have to research more into that, but just the fact that that they did pass the bill, from the best of my knowledge, is just kind of amazing, really, because looks like Saudi Arabia is not liking that too much. And mind you, the reason why we've had such that glut in oil prices is because Saudi Arabia and Russia have been in a just oil producing frenzy to try to undermine each other. And it actually looks like Russia is getting the upper hand on it, because they've managed to come up with a deal with China where they'll be, exchanging Russian energy services for gold-backed yuan. So it's not a really good deal for the U.S. petrodollar. In fact, you also have Iran, too, that's kind of squelched on a lot of their deals, and looks like, especially if Trump gets in, I could see Iran backing away from the U.S. petrodollar. So should be kind of interesting to see how that goes. Right now, the stock markets are completely rigged. Every time the mainstream media tries to promote like an idea of what the economy is like, it's totally ridiculous. All these increases in the stock markets are usually wash trades for the most part. There's no secret that the forex market has been rigged many times. Pretty much just Google markets rigged, and you pretty much find out how much of just a joke the stock market is right now. And I think that's, you look at just the massive layoffs. Here, like the top 10 layoffs, I think in, the United States Army laid off 40,000 people. Hewlett Packard laid off 30,000 people last year. Schlumberger Limited let off about close to 20,000 people. Great Atlantic Pacific and Tea Company, Microsoft, Baker Hughes, Halliburton, Procter & Gamble, Radio Shack, Caterpillar, J.P. Morgan Chase. Well, I don't really feel bad if they lose people. But Qualcomm, American Express, Weatherford International, Halliburton, Wet Seal Incorporated. They just keep laying off people left, right, and center. Obviously, there was that whole joke with Target, even though they lost pretty much their whole Canadian branch that they were trying to break into another country. That didn't work out too well. I guess the one gentleman who pushed for the whole going into Canada to begin with ended up still making like millions of dollars out of insurance claims or something like that, so he still gets rewarded, which is just funny. But it's kind of crazy to see how much I think I've heard Nokia too and a few other telecommunications for this year are pretty much laying off people left, right, and center. So, considering how with the Obamacare in the States, it got rid of a lot of full-time jobs because a lot of employers didn't want to pay for health insurance, so it brought up a lot of part-time jobs for people in the States. And so that kind of did make their stats look good, but let's be honest, as much as Obama keeps trying to say that everything's bright and shiny, even with their cooked numbers, they still haven't really been able to break 3% GDP growth per year ever since he's been in power. Which, if there isn't a 3%, if he doesn't hit the 3% growth this year, he's pretty much going to be known as the fourth worst economic record of presidents, and we're talking about presidents that were pretty much around the times of like great financial, either the Great Depression or the or different times earlier on in like the early 1900s or like the beginning of the 1913, I think. 1910, I believe there was a bit of a crash there too, which kind of prompted the whole thing for the Federal Reserve argument. But there's different panics that pretty much presidents have presided over, and that's pretty much the reason why they haven't been able to weren't able to get such huge GDP growth in that time. And I just think, I can't believe how much Obama lies through his teeth. It is just crazy how much that guy can lie and get away with it. But because he's trendy, because he's a Democrat, people, totally fall hook, line, and sinker. And it was kind of interesting. I had a debate with someone on YouTube who was talking about how Trump's followers are starting to look like, like Hitler's followers in Berlin. And the guy's saying how he's a huge student of history, even though, like Trump hasn't said anything bad against the Jews. In fact, the only, this is ridiculous. He's being, by like people that are so neocon, where everything pro-Israel, just because Trump suggested trying to find some peace between the Palestinians and Israelis, even though that's going to be good luck with that, pretty much, right? Just because he said he is pro-Israel, but he still wants to try to make peace so that, Israel isn't ultimately remembered as the country that completed a genocide against the Palestinians. If you look at the state, I mean, regardless of what side of the issue you're on the Palestinian and Israeli thing, I mean, it's a war that's gone on for so long. But, it's gotten to the point now where the Palestinian settlements are shrinking at an exponential rate. And, if you look over the past 30, 40 years, the evidence pretty much, is apparent for itself. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But because Trump has pretty much said that he wants to try to broker a peace between them, all of a sudden he's anti-Semitic, which is a total joke because he's been honored by the by Jewish NGOs and by AIPAC and stuff like that beforehand for some of his work of I'm trying to remember exactly where, but he's been known on record. If you just Google his affiliations with Israel, he's done a pretty good job at making sure that he's towing the pro-Israel line for that matter. So that can also be a big issue for a lot of people because, to be honest with you, I think it was Israel gets 1/5 of the foreign aid, which is just ridiculous when you look at it. And the military, just everything that's been pretty much given to them over the years has been pretty much, we do what Israel says, and it's pretty much the, you look at the what David Icke says about the Rothschild globalists. He does back it up, and the connections and I was watching a few of his videos, and he pretty much connects the dots when it comes down to it. I mean, I just watched a movie called The Big Short, and I really highly recommend that movie for a lot of people, so they can actually find out about the synthetic CDOs that pretty much just the big banks knew that they had, that they were packaging in shitty, credit stocks and just subprime mortgages and stuff like that were, just total absolute garbage, and they were just packaging them bees and really low quality shitty mortgages to into these packages that they're trying to pass them off as a bunch of AA or AAA or something like that. So it really does explain the fact that if you look at the people in that movie, they're not heroes by any means, and they say we're not heroes. We just saw the actual what was going on with the actual numbers, that nobody took the time to look at these giant groupings of mortgages to find out that there was that they were shitty mortgages, that the people a lot of these a lot of the I guess was it the a lot of people in the housing market that were just trying to make money off of the commission, were putting people through with barely any credit checks or any references, and a lot of them had those adjustable mortgages where, if shit did go down, but at that time everyone thought that, housing was the best safe bet that there was, pretty much. And these guys bet against it, and at certain points they were even kind of like losing money because they were paying the banks to pretty much keep up with bets that they were saying that was going to happen very soon. A lot of these guys were losing their money in the process of just coming up to the 2007, 2008, and then seeing just kind of like the lead up to the crash. And then they pretty much explained just how like the central banks knew that the people were eventually going to bail them out. Like, they knew that the bailout was going to happen. So it just goes to show you how just willing to fuck over the American people they were. How willing to fuck over people's 401ks, people's pensions, you name it. It's just, it was just a gong show. But once, it became to the point where it was profitable to start shorting the housing market, then people kind of jumped on board, and next thing you know, there's people that are paying 2-3 times the amount of their original mortgage that, ended up having the houses foreclosed on them. And you see the people that were making money off of it that were kind of like feeling bad about it afterwards because they knew exactly what they were doing, but they took advantage of a system that just got too arrogant. And it was kind of interesting. It was Mark Baum and I actually kind of like I'm trying to remember was it Steve Carell, I think, that played his character, and he did it really well too. I actually love that movie. It was really good. I'm just gonna close the door here. But yeah, I highly recommend that movie to anybody who wants to find out what's going on with the people that actually kind of shorted the housing market, and just kind of like what was going on with Bear Stearns and Goldman Sachs, and just that whole Bank of America, and just seeing what was going on with the Lehman Brothers and everything. So it was interesting. So I mean, nothing ever changed out of that too. They never. It's funny if you look at the end of that movie too. Like, it's funny because for anybody that knows what's actually going on in the economic skullduggery of what happened after the 2008 financial crisis, they make the ending. Like here I was just as soon as they said the last part in the ending. I don't want to spoil it for anybody because like there's so much to that movie you can watch, and from what I've said so far, really doesn't like do it any justice because they have some just really good actors in there too, and just some funny, just like some of the stuff in there they tell. It's pretty much like they'll pretty much in the movie say what parts was bullshit and what parts like they actually just kind of like was like completely true. And I thought it was awesome that here they were talking about the fact that the housing market was doomed to fail with the with all the overhyped credit ratings that they were giving these mortgage bundles. So, but anyways, it can really happen again. They never changed anything really. Like nobody really went to jail. In fact, it's kind of funny how they had a Mark Dice video how he's going around. I think it was like 9 out of 10 people. He was saying that Bernie Madoff and Bernie Sanders were going to run with each other. So it's going to be kind of funny to see what goes on with that. And seeing the reactions of people, they were totally like, "Oh, Bernie, oh, that's going to be awesome." And they had one guy who was like 40 or something. He's like, "What, Bernie Madoff?" And he's like, you got to be kidding me, not Bernie Madoff. So I'll probably put a link to the description in that video. So, I mean, I can understand how a lot of people who are like millennials, for the most part, don't really understand what's going on in politics. Like, I find following politics, no matter what country you're in, is actually very important, because like when people look at just like the state of the world, and they realize that shit's not getting better, shit's getting more expensive, harder to live, at their point now where they're doing a survey, and they're saying that most people now, like anyone from like, I think like their late teens to, like the 30s, are pretty much living at home. And can you really blame them? I mean, it's at the point where, it used to be a thing where, it was more of it was kind of frowned upon in like the 80s and 90s and stuff. But that was at a time where, the economy for the most part was doing good, even though there needed to be serious reforms. And I think it was kind of funny how Hillary Clinton is talking about a return to the 90s of how just wonderful and prosperous it was. But Greenspan, he totally just kept printing money, kept just thinking that everything was going to be fine, when he was actually one of the people that kind of made it so that instead of increasing interest rates, they kept artificial. They kept the artificial interest rates low. They kept printing out money and didn't want to think about the fact that the debt kept skyrocketing. And then you have Obama saying, "Oh well, increasing the debt ceiling doesn't increase the debt," which is just total bullshit. And I can't believe that guy has like he is a snake oil salesman. And I think it's so sad seeing all these little YouTube celebrities that have a chance to interview Obama. Oh man, I would have 10 good questions for him that would probably get me kicked off of YouTube and thrown in fucking Guantanamo. Oh man, I'd love to do a little interview with that guy and find out just what the hell are you thinking, man? Here I am, a Canadian. When Bush was in power, I was just like, man, they need to get anybody would be better than this guy. And sure enough, they put somebody who's just like the yin to his evil yang. Oh my god. But so then they got Hillary that's running right now, and it's actually kind of interesting to see what's going on. For the longest time, they kept saying for the last month or two that all these like protesters are like all the violent people. It's the Trump supporters that are causing all this stuff for these poor innocent Bernie and Hillary supporters that just happen to be at their convention causing shit. Yeah, so it was the Trump supporters. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But as soon as Bernie starts getting up in the polls and people realize just how when they bring up just how crooked Hillary Clinton is, Bernie's starting to get a little bit more support towards the end. And so now, all of a sudden, because the Bernie supporters see that Trump's already, practically got the nomination, unless he gets it stolen from him, are going after Hillary and Bill's record because of just their flip-flopping on LGBT issues like gay marriage, pretty much just the fact that, here she was a little, not too long ago, saying that she needs to, that they need to believe women when they say that that they've been raped, and then all of a sudden she's the same woman that's pretty much like silenced Bill Clinton's rape victims when him and her were in office. So I was going to show what kind of just cluster F that is. Oh my god. But people are starting to realize it, and then you got Bernie supporters that some of them are a little bit more violent. I'm not going to say it, there's a lot of people that are just sick of the two-party system, and actually it should be interesting to see what's going on with the Libertarian Party. And I know that the Libertarian and Green Party are getting a little bit more traction in the States, which I think is good, because the thing about Trump is that he has been meeting up with establishment Republican neocons, but he kind of has to do that being a Republican. It's just it comes with the territory. But knowing just all the stuff that Trump has brung into the mainstream media in the past little bit, I really do think that this guy is for real. The 28 pages, for example, that was a big no-no. He just came out saying, talking about the questionable circumstances of Vince Foster's death, and I think the Inquirer is going to be doing a story about just all the weird, how Vince Foster, there's two separate reports, one of him being, I think, found next to a cannon or something like that, and another one saying that he was found in his car, something about the briefcase, which just happened to be found there was a report saying it was found in the back seat, and then a few days later it just happened to turn up in his office, so with a bunch of Clinton people work. So there's a lot of really sketchy stuff that was going on there, and I love Trump. Trump's campaign is so easy for him right now, just because all he has to do, we're talking about Trump, the New York Times tried to come out and say, oh, Trump once called this girl fat, and oh my god, she was so offended, when she wasn't. She said, it was in the 80s, and she actually went on and said, you guys are putting words in my mouth. And when he wasn't married, so he was single in the 80s, and had all this money and whatnot, and said to a girl, hey, you look really attractive, you want to date me or whatnot, stuff like that. And all of a sudden, oh my god, that's so evil. And it's really, New York Times, that's all you can come up with right now? And then Joy Behar from The View tried to say that, if we're going to go after Hillary for Bill's mistakes, we're going to have to go after Trump for, I think, saying, have you seen that article in the New York Times? It's like, what are you talking about? They had nothing. You're trying to say, Joy Behar, that you're comparing a guy who's really successful and is asking someone out who doesn't have a wife or anything, has no marital, vows whatsoever at the time, and is acting just like, a male who is pretty much, in a good position and has money and, probably has a chance of dating, beautiful supermodels and stuff like that. Unlike the rest of us schmoes. But, and then you're comparing it to Bill Clinton actually raping women and trying to say that that's equal ground political. Like, just fucking get your head checked, woman. And people are starting to see through the bullshit. I think that's awesome. Should be kind of interesting to see just, like, I doubt Hillary is going to have much of a... I mean, you have people that are just saying, never Trump, Trump's evil. And bringing me to another thing to compare it to was the Facebook scandal with them censoring conservatives. And kind of funny how Mark Zuckerberg's like, at first he was saying, no, that's not true. That's just a few, it doesn't happen. And then I think there was like a whistleblower that came out that used to work for Facebook and said, yeah, we, regularly censor conservatives and people who had like anti-feminist, ideologies and stuff like that, or pretty much anyone who calls, Anita Sarkeesian out on her bullshit, because that's all she spews. And, it's kind of interesting to see how, different mainstream articles have been trying to say, it's not that bad. There are worse things than, but no, it's like Facebook. You have to look at just how many, like millions, I think it's like billions of people that use Facebook. And for a lot of millennials that, are out and about or doing their own thing, they don't have time to watch the 6 o'clock news, for the most part. Like, they may or they may not, but a lot of the younger generation gets their news from Facebook. So if you put a leftist slant on there and you say that it's a free and open source society to try to, increase like human evolution and social development, then you are, false advertising in a lot of ways that way. If you're just censoring different, the same people that gave trending spots to Black Lives Matter. And if you look at, like, their inspirational leader, like Asada, something like that, or some chick who, like, freaking is in, like, Cuba right now and, like, killed a bunch of police officers and stuff, and, like, you're not gonna win over, people by, being completely militant or extremist on any side. You have to kind of, be like, hey, there's some racial issues in this country, or around the world, for that matter, that need to be addressed. But with these Black Lives Matter people and these social justice warriors, it's all they focus on. And they focus on such narrow aspects and weird myths and stuff. It's like, it's a weird cult. It really is. And, they have Lauren Southern, who has had, like, piss dumped on her in public. She's just like, oh my god, it's ridiculous the amount of stuff that she's had to put up with these fucking crazy feminazis. But, what gets me about the whole... I see a lot of channels out there, like Sargon of Akkad, Thunderfoot, Bering, a lot of people from around the world that are obviously just talking about how just bullshit feminism is. And I'm like, I understand the need for those channels because, there's a lot of crap that's being spewed out there, like Milo Yiannopoulos and Steven Crowder and stuff like that. Like, I see that they're, going after the whole SJW and... like the whole feminist agenda, and I think that's great because, there is a need for a debate, but a lot of these SJWs don't even want that. It's just screaming in your face. Like, I watch these videos of what's going on in the States, and all I hear are like these leftists, like George Soros financed, MoveOn.org or freaking. Black Lives Matter people that are just like, you're a white male, and the guy's like AIDS Skrillex is the one that is what they call him that they're making fun of. The guy's like a pasty white guy who looks like kind of androgynous, who's like yelling at somebody for being white. It's like, oh my god, these people who are like the biggest control freaks ever, who usually aren't white themselves, but they're like, trying to pass this like bullshit guilt factor to people. It's ridiculous. Or you get these feminists that are like coming up with like ridiculous terminology that doesn't make sense to anybody who's not in their weird fucking fruity little cult. That, if you just said, what the fuck is mansplaining? Like stupid shit like that. It's just like, Nobody gives a shit about your little passive-aggressive fucking bullshit terms that, you say to make yourself feel morally superior to people. But, I mean, yeah, there is, there is that whole sexism. Like there is stuff like that. There are people who are chauvinists. There's people, who are misogynist and misandrist. You get extremes of every aspect of a debate or of an argument, pretty much. But what gets me about the MRA activists and stuff like that is that they don't really see the bigger picture. Like, yeah, they're getting their subscribers. They're making, some really great valid points and some great arguments, which I agree or maybe disagree with some of them on. But, it's definitely, it needs to be there because, you need the reality check from, different opposing viewpoints that have valid arguments from their perspectives. But, they don't realize that this isn't just like all of a sudden third wave feminism is being popped out of nowhere. No, they got to realize that, it's like a UN agenda, that it's globally being, it's not just like, it's not just, a small group here and there. It is like a huge takeover of colleges and university campuses, political factions too. When I was with the NDP, I really noticed that there was this huge kind of like I ended up being voted as an equity rep, and I thought it was for people with disabilities. It was, but they kind of like make a broad spectrum, and they pretty much told me anybody who isn't white, I'm pretty much trying to represent, and I'm like, wait a second, that seems just kind of racist to me, like. Like to pick like one group or like certain groups but leave another group out. Like if anything, if you want to change things, you got to bring in, like you got to get all the groups together and be like, to see what a problem or if there is a problem and how to work together to fix it, as opposed to just going to the extreme side of just calling people out and just causing shit really. So you see, for me, I see it as like a global kind of push towards the not so much as like juice boxes trying to make you gay, like people joke around about Alex Jones and stuff like that, but there definitely is a chemical kind of attack on just humanity in general, ideological, educational, pretty much just to destroy the idea of a traditional family values. And which is interesting when I see people that are talking about, we need to thin out the herd pretty much because of all this overpopulation and all these like exaggerated figures that they're talking about. And you know what? In certain countries, yeah, like India and China, where they're having a lot of kids and stuff, and like the it's they don't really have a lot of measures put in place to to stop people from dying from childhood illnesses and stuff like that. Yeah, I understand that. It's good to kind of try to curb the population without it being too eugenicist. But at the same time, here in like the Western civilization, there's fewer people having more kids. Like there's a lot of people, like especially when like people that like that are either transgender or homosexual, if they don't adopt kids or don't want kids in their lifestyle, it's kind of a culture that does promote not having like a lot of kids or having traditional family kind of setups, which for some people, if that works for them, by all means. I mean, I had my niece over with my sister, and man, I love my niece, I love my sister, but man, babies can be loud, and I don't think I could put myself in that situation. No, I'm just joking. I probably could if I wanted to, but if I ever had a kid or whatnot like that. But most people in Western society, they're not having that 2.1 kids. And sorry, just had dinner. So it's kind of interesting to see how they're gonna, we're bringing all these people from like the Middle East and whatnot who actually do have a lot of kids and stuff like that. So maybe that'll balance it out. See, for me, for like immigration, for me, has always not been a left-right issue. Like, it's a common sense issue. If you have a country that's doing really well, that needs a demanding labor force, then bring people in that are skilled. But don't just bring in people that don't have any identification, don't have the proper identification with them, or like fake IDs and stuff like that, and come from an area where, like, they were pretty much sent in there originally to take out Syria, the Kurds, and other Christian groups and stuff like that. A lot of these people that you're getting, and I have to say, it sucks because, it's those few like crazy refugees, the military-aged men that decide to do stupid stuff that that makes it look bad for people who are just generally trying to get away from a shitty part of the world and want to practice their beliefs, but don't want to push everything on the rest of the people. They just want to do it in their own home, have their own values, and want to come to like North America and stuff. And those people, I am totally bring them on over. Bring those families over that are just trying to find peace and trying to live out their lives and provide like a lot of first generation immigrants work their ass off to get to provide a life for their kids, and I totally support that. But what we're seeing, like, it's not all apples and peaches and cream for that matter in Europe. There's a huge rise in rape epidemics that's going on. They had that Tal Rasha game where you look at like what was going on in Cologne. And the sad thing is, from what the reports are, like, even though like the German media and pretty much the European leftist media and the EU, who's just came out and saying that they're not gonna acknowledge any like conservative or who they consider far right, even though it could be like a libertarian or anybody who just doesn't want to be part of the EU, they won't acknowledge their legitimacy, which just goes to show you just how fascist the European Union is. And how they just don't care about the national laws. In fact, I am in total favor for the Brexit for a lot of reasons. Just because, if the British people didn't vote to go into the EU, they were pushed into the EU. And what gets me about the EU is that if they'll have a vote from like certain people, and if they don't like the outcome of that vote, they'll keep just redoing it until they get the outcome they want. And they're writing, I think, 80% of the UK laws right now, which is just ridiculous. A country should be able to write its own laws to service its own people, not just to give into laws that give an advantage to a certain group, which screws over your country completely. That just brings up, hatred and nationalistic backlash. And that's really what we're seeing in Europe right now, are people that are just sick of this huge mass Muslim immigration. And what gets me is the fact that Saudi Arabia is one of the big, they have 100,000 some odd air-conditioned tents that could easily, that get used maybe a month or two of the year. They could easily donate that towards people who are refugees. They're the same people that have their own, have the same kind of, I think it's the Sunni and the whole Shiite dispute, but regardless, they're still practicing practically the same faith as you. You think they would be more, Qatar, would be taking more refugees, but no. Instead, it's it has to be Europe that takes them in and stuff, and that's just causing when you have German towns that have a very small amount of people that are getting 4 times the population and migrants, and they're getting to the point where they tell girls not to walk around in miniskirts because they could get raped. It's what kind of fucking people are you bringing in? And they had German television. They're pretty much just cheering about how a lot of the Germans in the next 20, 30 years are going to be all Muslims and stuff. And I say to them, and they were cheering, and I'm like, well, hey, I understand that there was a pretty bad time in an ultra right when you look back in the past of Germany, but it's almost like they use that excuse of people who are very ultra nationalistic, and they pretty much just use that fear against them to say, oh well, you're just like Hitler. Well, we can't say anything like that. You can't be critical of anyone because you're just like Hitler. And what I find about the EU and the UN is that they push these agendas where here they are, saying that what's going on with Marie Le Pen, I guess the Austrian leader who almost won but came very close, but was beaten out by I think the Green Party or someone else there, who was pro-immigration and stuff like that. But there's a huge backlash. You have the Catalonians that have pushed for independence from Spain. There's a lot of different, and there's also the Bataclan region that might succeed too. They're looking into different aspects of what they can do. So it should be interesting to see how that plays out. But what gets me is that, here they are saying, oh, well, you can't have a conservative or you can't have a nationalistic view in the EU. And the EU originally was, like, the idea for the EU was actually originally talked about by Adolf Hitler, where he wanted to make a, kind of like a New World Order kind of thing. So I just find that's kind of interestingly fitting, because here you have the UN saying that Trump is like Hitler, and, like, all these other countries that are saying, oh, Marine Le Pen is like Hitler, and, they want to, kill all these Muslims and shit, when, they have, in Ukraine right now, they have a neo-Nazi installed government that pretty much has just firebombed fucking rabbis' houses. They've desecrated Holocaust memorials and stuff. And I'm not apologizing for the Jewish people. I mean, it's horrible what happened in World War II to the Jews. I don't deny the Holocaust. Obviously, it freaking happened. People who don't believe in that are just stupid. Just like I understand that some people in Ukraine were pretty pissed off from the Holodomor, I think it was, where Stalin starved out like millions of Ukrainians and just sold off their whole entire year's harvest, and that was just horrible too. So I can understand where they're coming from. Also, for people that weren't really, especially in the Kiev, the more of the western Ukraine, that has a huge distrust. I mean, Chernobyl happened, under the Soviet watch, and that didn't turn out good, and a lot of Ukraine's national budget each year has been spent for quite some time on mediating the health risks that occurred from that, and that's why when you look at Ukraine, you actually see the legitimate struggles for power and the different political ideologies there. But still, I mean, what the West did by going in there, and you had George Soros pretty much talking about how he had people in there for his Open Society Institute, and just like the fact that there was the call between I can't remember exactly who it was in Victoria and Newland, suggested that some of the people that were put in there were actually firing on the police and the protesters that were part of the far right, the neo-Nazi agents. So they totally have taken advantage of that, and you don't see anything about that in the Western media. Western media doesn't like to talk about the fact that there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and I've covered that in many videos. There's plenty of evidence on there. You can just check on Google. And it's just been a gong show. It's just horrible. Like, it's like the UN and the EU only like the fascists that they are in charge of. And I mean, you look at like the Human Rights Council, they just put Saudi Arabia on the council. I mean, for people who have like one of the worst human rights violations that just came out recently, a couple days ago, and said that they're not ready to have women drivers. It's pretty messed up that they're, here they are, like, here's this huge demonization of Russia by the LGBTQ, silent P, whatever the hell they want to call themselves. And by all means, I'm a sexual libertarian, so whatever consenting adults do behind closed doors, I could really give a damn about, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I don't care if people want to, like, people who I play online games with who are trans that are just really super awesome people, and I'm totally fine with those people being who they are, because I wouldn't want them to be anyone else that they didn't feel comfortable with. So, they're just, I don't really care about that issue. But I see the hypocrisy of Western civilization completely criticizing Russia's policies on LGBT. And you know what? I wouldn't, I feel bad for anybody who's homosexual in Russia. Apparently they say, like, they have people out there that are going around and, killing people and stuff like that are homosexual, or, like, having parades and stuff like that, and that's screwed up. But, I mean, you also look at the fact that the U.S. has pretty much backed Saudi Arabia, who, like, throws homosexuals off of buildings for executions, and, like, Saudi Arabia just recently ramped up a huge campaign to kill anybody who was homosexual, or, it's just ridiculous. It really is. So, it pretty much comes down to, you have to pay attention to politics. Whether or not it's the U.S., whether or not it's your country, and, like, here in Canada, like, I've pretty much given up on Canada, because until Canadians fucking wake the fuck up or have a really bad housing crisis kind of bubble pop on them, or see the U.S. kind of go down the road, that's the only way we're really gonna freaking come around here. I mean, we just had a huge blow. I think a third of our oil-producing potential up in Fort McMurray has been pretty much crippled with the fires that they've had up there. So that's kind of raised the price a little bit, but, considering how Saudi Arabia and Russia are still just pumping out, and they're the powerhouses of the OPEC, even though OPEC really doesn't exist anymore when you look at just the amount of Just how countries just don't care. They're just, in a war with each other. See, originally there was a lot of speculation, and what it was is for the fracking was making a lot of money, was getting a lot of investment. So Saudi Arabia and Russia kept the price of oil as low as possible. And, for a very small period of time, it actually hurt the Russian ruble very significantly. In fact, the U.S. State Department was saying, oh, well, probably right now is not a good time to invest in the Russian energy sector. And then the Kaiser Report did I think about 3 episodes back, they showed how just because of their partnership with the BRICS, the creation of the partnership of the yuan-backed, gold-backed yuan, and their business relationship with China and their trading, has pretty much just increased their stocks to the point where they're doing really well right now. In fact, a year afterwards, they're almost I think 2 or 3 times more than almost 100% investment. If anybody would have started buying the Russian bonds, and invested in the ruble and whatnot. So that's kind of interesting to see how that's turned out. Also, gold has been up for a bit. It's been getting kind of suppressed a bit because people don't want to cause a panic. I mean, here they are trying to say that their interest rates are going to go up, but let's be honest, interest rates are not going to go up. As much as they try to say, and if they do increase, it'll be like a 0.5%, because they can't increase the interest rate too much. There's too much serviceable debt. There's too much wash trading. It's ridiculous. It really is. The amount of money printing is just a joke right now. And if if the market really did take into account for just the inflation of overprinting of money, the economy would just completely crash right now. But it's pretty much like the land of Oz out there in the stock market, which is just what we're seeing with a lot of companies right now, just continuing the wash trades, trying to go into negative interest rates to screw people over even more, making it so that's not worth having money in the banks. And I'm seeing a lot of people going into gold and silver, what it looks like right now with the trading. Just the volume of trading in commodities has gone up significantly. And it looks like there's another, they just came out with some good housing statistics, but, with China being in where it is right now, it could really go any other way. And there's actually a few lulls in the market. Vancouver has hit a huge, just kind of huge bubble. What's going on? Let's be honest, a lot of the investing in housing and real estate is Chinese foreign investment. People, they're looking of ways to diversify their portfolio. But the thing about that is you have everybody investing into these giant property bubbles. It's just a matter of time before the average person whose wages have not gone up whatsoever. A lot of these manufacturing jobs that are getting sent overseas, and high-paying jobs just in general, full-time jobs being broken up into part-time jobs for other people, is not going to, people aren't going to be able to afford a mortgage at these higher rates. So it's just a matter of time before that bubble pops too. And what we've been seeing the past 20 years is pretty much like an 8 to 10 year cycle, where the bubble pops after a bit or it gets a little deflated. So it should be interesting to see what's going on. My grandparents right now actually have a house that they put on the market in UK, and not near London, because God forbid, that's just a freaking gong show there. But they were out more towards, I think, around the Winchester area or something like that. So they had one offer, but with this whole Brexit thing that's coming up in about a month, I'm not surprised that nobody's really buying real estate right now to find out how it's going to affect the real estate market. And I just think it's kind of funny, because when I'm looking at the reasons to stay in all the commercials that have been put out by David Cameron and his fucking idiot cronies, and it's all fear-based. It's like, oh my god, World War III will happen if we don't stay in the EU. And I recommend, I'll actually put links to the description, Brexit the movie. I highly recommend anybody who's listening to this, I know I really kind of go off the radar for a couple weeks or a month at a time, so... But it's pretty much like there's not a whole lot I can really say, because there's so many different channels out there that are just acing it, that are just calling it for what it is. And, I wait for a period of time before I can get like a good run through of what's going on in the world at the moment and suggestions to make there. Like I said, X22 report, the guy is spot on with a lot of the stuff he talks about. Kaiser Report, I love Stacey Herbert and Max Kaiser. They just really, they do it in a fun and entertaining way. And sometimes Max gets a little off his rocker, but that's, the best part about what I like about him talking about the economy. Fabian for Liberty. I've mentioned all these channels beforehand and whatnot, so it's definitely computer's going off on me here. I've been talking so long. But it's gotten to the point where it should be interesting to see what goes on with just kind of like the price of gold, what's going to happen with the U.S. Treasury bonds, whether or not the U.S. debt's going to be increased, whether or not Saudi Arabia, what they're doing right now, which is actually kind of interesting, they're doing a preemptive strike, saying, it was, yes, 15 of the 19 hijackers were from us, but those hijackers were given U.S. visas, work visas by the CIA. So they're pretty much turning around right now. Saudi Arabia is saying the U.S. caused 9/11, and they're pretty much just coming out. So this is a huge vindication for me, because I've believed that there is more behind 9/11 than what we've been led to believe. Pretty much, there's just so much coincidences that happen. Just this Silverstein taken. It's just ridiculous how the insurance policy, ran out. With I think a day or a couple days beforehand. James Rickards, The Death of Money. I recommend anybody who has the money to buy that book, or at least listen to what I know. He kind of goes by James Rickard, who talks about just the mass amount of insider trading. These guys weren't just some people in a cave somewhere. There was a huge backing of people that were making money on these put options against the airliners involved. So there's just so much insider trading that was going on beforehand, and it was just so blatantly obvious. And a lot of the records, especially where the plane happened to hit in the Pentagon, which had all the records from just a bunch of. If you really look into it, I tell people to do your own research. I mean, the fact that World Trade Center 7 went down at free fall speeds, not getting hit by a plane, and that whole pancake theory that NIST tried to pass off, even though it would have had spots where it was uneven, there was no resistance. And even John Kerry made it slip, said that there might have been a controlled demolition for World Trade Center 7, and that takes days to set up. So I'm not, I think NIST saying that there weren't any initial explosions when it's been recorded on multiple different cameras of the explosions. There was boom, 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 and sure enough, World Trade Center 7 went down. And you know what? Whether or not you agree with what happened on 9/11 was an inside job, it has come out through the 28 pages. They haven't been released yet, and I'm really hoping that they do. That there was some Saudi involvement in. I mean, look what happened with the Saudi family, the Bin Ladens. They flew every single member out when there was a no-fly zone, pretty much for the rest of the world. What's going on in the U.S. right now? Why, if they don't want borders, if they say, okay, well, we're gonna what Obama's doing, there's been cases of LaGuardia Airport where there've been huge planefuls of Mexicans or people from, Latin American countries or other than Mexicans, which is also another group that they're finding are coming through the border, and didn't even check them for identifications, just let them go right into the States, didn't ask any questions whatsoever, and 80% of them don't show up for their court dates anyways, and it usually can be about a year or two after the time where they actually make it into the country, so they're obviously in the country. So why is the U.S. making this total security theater with the TSA, and then you have the TSA purposely slowing down lines or reducing the amount of workers so that they could get a little bit more funding from Congress? Just total bullshit. They haven't. Here you have the TSA that haven't caught one terrorist, where they have tests where they did on the CIA where 90 or 95% of the people that had fake bombs and stuff like that or weapons on them managed to get through. And then they have these counts of people that are getting their stuff rifled through and stealing stuff. And you have people that are getting in trouble. There's a ridiculous amount. I was reading this list. I think We Are Change. Luke Rudowski had a link where I was reading just pages and pages of of like we have like these pedophiles that happen to make it into the TSA and they're like groping little fucking kids and getting off on it and shit, just total fucking crazy shit. And yet they're pretty much bringing in illegals and letting them, not deporting them and not doing their job at the border. So I can see why people are supporting Trump. And you know what, you gotta have immigration. No country with open borders has ever stood the test of time. Let's be honest. You can't go to Mexico and have a kid and get them to pay for everything. No, they'll throw your ass in fucking work camp, it's ridiculous. So maybe if you have money, they might, you can bribe them and they might, leave you alone, but it's ridiculous. It really is. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Here in Canada, we're bringing in refugees, even though, the one thing I do like about Rebel Media is that they've totally called the fact that, they're not being vetted and that it's a total gong show. Here in Canada, we're having the same kind of leftist, censorship. There was a guy in Toronto that started stabbing people and started saying Allah Akbar and shit. The media ignored that. Fucking Halifax, they had these refugee kids that are like different instances where they're strangling like fucking Eastern Halifax girls, and they managed to have a huge media blankout saying the school was saying all that shit. Racist reporters from the Rebel Media. Oops, sorry again. So, it's just ridiculous how there's this huge censorship, and I think that we should allow criticism if there's cases of people that are acting up. We shouldn't give them a special status to let them do it, because then that doesn't teach them that their values or what they're doing is incompatible with Western civilization, with a free and open society, pretty much, Like, Sharia law has no place in Canada. And in Toronto and Thornhill, they're having it where they've turned the gym on like one day of the week into a fucking a mosque, pretty much, where girls have to sit in the back, and the girls who are menstruating have to sit way far in the back because they're subhuman people. And that's just, it's crazy how the left, the same people that are trying to be like, be open and multicultural, and the CBC, they had the whole Fort McMurray situation, and of course they have to bring in some Syrians that are helping out too to make it look good, right? Because they have to, push their agenda. It's like, it's a fucking fire in, Fort McMurray, for Christ's sakes. And they have to bring in these little, look, the Syrians are helping us out in our time of need. It's like they can't just focus on the story of all these families that have lost these fucking places. They can't just leave it fucking alone and just report on the story for what it actually is. A total fucking tragedy for Canadian families in fucking Alberta. No, they have to throw their fucking agenda in. And then you see Elbowgate, which is the newest thing here in Canada with Trudeau going, and they made it a big thing about the woman that he happened to elbow, but he went in there and started pushing a bunch of guys too. So he went in there, physically, throwing his the weight of his arms around and stuff like that, trying to cause shit just because one guy couldn't walk fucking 2-3 feet around a group of people that were talking about political stuff. So just total bullshit. And you know what, if Canada gets legalized weed next year, that's probably the only fucking good thing that's going to come out of the Trudeau presidency. Might as well call him president, because he's acting like it. He's his dad pretty much just screwed over the Bank of Canada here and pretty much made the equivalent of what the U.S. has with 1913 when they implemented the Federal Reserve, which gave away the printing power of our money to foreign entities, so we have to pay fucking interest on it. So just goes to show you how that is. The more you look at just you see, that's why it's important. I like to cover a lot of stuff what goes on in the States, because Canada's, especially the last 10-20 years, we've practically followed, aside from the Iraq War, but we were pretty much helping them in all their UN ventures. Syria, Libya, pretty much what's going on in Ukraine. We're still supporting Poroshenko. We've had him over here in Canada. We have, I think, a 1 or 2 million of Ukrainians that got away from the whole Soviet control, so obviously they still have a beef with Russia. But, they're totally fine with the fact that we're supporting a neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine, and I can't support that whatsoever. Neo-Nazis are not cool. See, I'm not a conservative by any means. I don't, there's certain conservative values that I do see that I actually I do agree with. But there's also certain liberal, and libertarian things that I totally agree with or disagree with. So I don't even put myself in the political spectrum in that regards, just because I have beliefs that, could be considered, you could be considered liberal or right-wing by the, old school, pretty much that whole ideological partisan kind of thing, and putting people into like different sides of the political spectrum just doesn't exist anymore. We're in a new age. We're in an age now where you have Obama that's going down to Cuba and saying, "Oh well, capitalism, communism, just find something that works in between." It's just like, there are these people that are just like, protesting the fact that they want freedom and liberty, and they're getting like hauled off in fucking cars, but ASPN people are just laughing, oh, they're probably gonna get put in a work camp. They're probably gonna get their organs harvested or some shit. It's so trendy to laugh at them. But, it's just a ridiculous kind of notion to see, Western UN and kind of like European Union, just kind of like the globalist agenda to try to like make the whole nationalistic approach of people that don't want to sell out their countries as racist or bad or xenophobic or like Hitler, when they openly support neo-Nazi regimes in Ukraine, or support Saudi Arabia, or like very oppressive cultures where if you're, a homosexual, or if you're a woman who wants to drive with a male accompaniment, or like, if you don't want to get fucking gang raped by 15 fucking people, then, you're pretty much fucked in those countries. You know what I mean? Oh my god, it's the hypocrisy is real. But I guess I'm gonna kind of leave it, just kind of do a wrap up right now. So so I have to say, like, anybody who's just kind of focusing more on the feminist and men's rights issues things on the channels out there, like, I see that you have people that are just kind of defending it, and people that are like against the whole new third wave feminism move, which I totally agree with. Not the third wave feminist, but the whole being against it, because the wage gap myth and the patriarchy and the college rape statistic, which is total bullshit and stuff like that. I mean, problems do exist. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have, bad people in any, side of an argument, or just in any culture or race, religion, or, sex for that matter. You're gonna get assholes and bitches, which is kind of how it is. But like, I don't understand why people just focus mainly on that issue. I mean, yeah, it gets some subscriptions, it gets some views and stuff, and, it's kind of playing it safe. But we can't play it safe anymore. We have these trade agreements that are just completely bypassing national sovereignty. We have, like, what's going on in the European Union, and with the whole Brexit. I mean, British people of all people should see just how badly they've been getting fucked. I mean, take Switzerland. They've never joined the EU. They have different trade deal. If they want a free trade deal with a country, they just draw up a free trade deal. They don't need this bullshit corporate control grid where they have to have like hundreds of different laws for making clocks, or, for towels, or for freaking alarm clocks and stupid shit like that. All this, stuff that's just like killing the jobs, and just, making it so they're paying all this money to unelected officials and having their laws made by unelected officials. And this is going to affect... people on YouTube are starting to notice that the copyright claims are getting a little bit more intense for people who are getting, like, for trying to bring stuff for different news articles and whatnot. But they don't realize that with this whole TPP being acknowledged and adopted globally, that it gives the U.S. intellectual property rights pretty much the gold standard. So all these countries are pretty much going to be following the whole, and they're trying to pass jurisdiction too, where, you're not, like, you might not be able to post a link. Like, there's this whole talk about how the U.S. government's trying to crack down on the Drudge Report. The DNC head has pretty much came out and said that she's, and then she said, "Oh, I had the death threats as soon as I said we need to go after Drudge Report." It's like, here you are saying we need to completely get rid of free speech, and yet you complain about the fact that you got a few death threats from people that were outrightly fucking pissed off. Well, you're probably going to get that anyways. You're a political figure. Yeah, deal with that. I mean, if you're a politician and you do something that completely outrightly fucks over people, you're gonna get a wave of criticism that may be a little bit extreme. Because if we all know one thing about the internet is that people are completely reasonable when they're online. So I mean, it's just or when they feel their rights are being violated. So it should be kind of interesting to see what goes on with that. But anyways, thank you very much for listening to my rants. Pretty much just been kind of seeing what goes on with everything. Should be kind of interesting to see if the U.S. petrodollar goes on for any much longer. Not calling any, false flags that could happen or anything like that, but, I mean, there's really a lot of stuff that can happen right now. It's, the world right now is a powder keg, and, it's pretty crazy when we're living in a time where, a plane, like what was going on with, I think, 804, I'm not too sure if that was the flight number that just recently went down from Paris to Cairo. And, the first thing that people automatically thought was terrorism, and that's just the world we live in today, which is sad. So, everybody, keep safe. Anybody out there who wants to, I would recommend, it makes sense to, stock up on a little bit of food and ration. Even if you just have, 3 months worth of food and, water and stuff, just as an in-case shit happens scenario is probably a good thing. Or at least, it's not crazy to have a prepper plan where, you have, a cabin or somewhere where you can kind of go, or, property if you have the money. If not, I mean, a lot of people don't, right? So... But just have, a plan where if, in case shit does go and hit the fan, that you can get out safely with your family and stuff. Because really, when it comes down to it, that's really all that matters is, the people that you care about, I mean, you can try to start things new, but, when it gets to the point where, I mean, you take, the Great Depression where when that happened, 60% of people were still, living out in rural areas and could still kind of, take care of their families and stuff, but they just couldn't really make money or take care of really anyone else. But we have now, so the fact that, a good portion, I think it was, under, 5% people that can only really kind of support themselves if in a really bad situation. So, grow your own gardens, do that stuff, and just try to, hope for the best. Hopefully I'm just kind of worrying a little too much here, but, when you have, I don't even know why we're in this Cold War 2.0 with Russia. It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, the whole 80s and 90s was just pretty much trying to get away from that whole, that it's us versus them mentality. Where, in the 50s and 60s, they had those commercials where, when you see the Flash, kids, duck in cover, but we're almost at the point now where they might as well start putting those back on TV because it's scary where we're at, Hopefully within the next year, things sizzle down and I just would really hate to see, a war with Russia and China, and it's there are definitely groups that are trying to push it towards that, which is just kind of screwed up, and also there's this huge movement to try to censor any kind of criticism, any kind of free speech, and it really does go to show you that the New World Order is real. This push for global government, this global influence, global laws over national laws is outright in the open. Agenda 21, the Agenda 2030, stuff like that that's being promoted out there to, just kind of make it so that, in California, they have a guy who has been pretty much just, making tiny little homes for the homeless, and they've done everything they can to just totally screw this guy over, to make it so that he can't, and all he's trying to do is just give a little, a stepping stone from people that need to get from being homeless and sleeping in the gutter to, getting employment and getting an actual legitimate place for themselves. So, it's just, it goes to show you just how bad society's been getting right now. So, it can only go on for so much longer. And the fact that we didn't even have any reforms after the 2008 financial crisis just really speaks volumes to, the global... Iceland is doing great right now. They, I wish we could have done what Iceland did and fucking thrown those assholes in jail. And, as much as people, as much as these trendy, Bernie supporters that want everything free in the States, or social justice warriors that you get here in Canada, a lot of like third wave feminists and people that voted for Trudeau and think that they're doing so good right now, don't realize that the fact that we've already spent $20 billion here in Canada on people who weren't even Canadian. The refugees that we're bringing in, as estimated by the Fraser Institute, to be at least $16 billion, plus the UN Children's Fund that we ended up giving money to as soon as he came into office. When you add up all the contributions for UN pretty much programs, we've already spent $20 billion without him spending a cent on Canadians. So it's just to show you what's like exactly how much of a globalist tool that asshole is. So I mean, his dad pretty much sold out Canada, and I guess he's coming to finish off the job. So, but anyways, I will leave it as it is, and thank you very much for listening to me, and keep on rocking in the free world as long as it stays free. So hopefully things get better, but it might be that case where things get worse before it does. So keep on rocking out there, and take care. Take care of yourself, your family, all the people that you care about, your community if you can. You know, there's nothing wrong going out and doing services and trying to, get people in like your neighborhood and whatnot like that, and just kind of tell them about the state of the world. And, we need to get to the point where it's cool to talk about politics, where it's cool to talk about how badly we're getting screwed over. I've noticed that some of the people I've talked to about like issues like 9/11, stuff like that, a lot of people, are kind of like, you'll get the people like, oh, those are just conspiracy theorists and blah, 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 blah. But you'll get a lot of people that are like, yeah, it's crazy the World Trade Center 7 fell at free fall speed without a plane hitting it. Or, yeah, it's crazy that, there's just, like the Silverstein took out like an insurance bid on it like 2 weeks beforehand, and, pretty much like made millions, I think possibly billions, I'm not 100% sure exactly how much he made off of it, or the insider trading before, just stuff like that, or the 9/11, the Bandar Bush, with his they call him Bandar Bush because he's practically like, he was the best friends of the Bush family and whatnot, and his wife is implicated in actually sending money to, some of the hijackers and stuff beforehand. So I'm kind of glad this 28 pages is being released. Like I said before, I'm going to stop repeating myself. So you guys take care, and have a good one. Peace.